Picture a team that looks fine on paper. Good people, supervisor who shows up, cares, tries hard, numbers that aren't failing, they're just fine. Some might call it steady, others might call it unremarkable. Nothing's on fire, nothing's getting flagged in a performance review, and yet, if you sat with that team for long enough, you'd feel it. Something's capped, something's missing. They're not as good as they should be, not as good as what everyone on that team is individually actually capable of being. So here's the question I want us to sit with today. If nothing is visibly broken, what's actually holding them back? Welcome back to the Frontline Leadership Podcast, where we help organizations strengthen and empower the leaders their operations depend on. I'm your host, Craig Coyle, former Apache helicopter pilot, aerospace leader, and founder of Operation Lead. Over the last several episodes, we've been building the pieces that make a frontline team actually perform. We talked about accountability as infrastructure, not personality. We talked about why the difficult conversation your supervisors avoid is costing them more than having it ever would. We talked about culture, where it actually lives and who really builds it. Each of those is true on its own, but today I want to show what's beneath all of it. There's a ceiling that most frontline teams hit, and it has nothing to do with talent and nothing to do with effort. Lencioni is one of the most respected organizational consultants and authors in the business world. You've probably heard his name before. His work on team dysfunction is considered foundational, if not required reading in leadership circles that go far beyond the front line. But here's what's interesting. Lencioni built his model from the corporate consulting room. On the contrary, we've been building ours from the cockpit and the manufacturing floor. But by the end of this episode, I think you'll see something that I didn't expect to see when I started studying his work. See, we've been circling the same exact problem the entire time. We just didn't have a name for it yet. And that name is the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And if you haven't picked up a copy of the book yet, I highly recommend that you add it to your list. Lencioni's model is a pyramid, 5 layers, and here's the part that matters most. Each layer is the foundation for the one above it. Just like in our conversations on Maslow's hierarchy in episodes 3 and 5, you cannot skip a layer. And if the bottom's cracked, everything stacked on top of it's unstable, no matter how solid it might look from a distance. Let's walk it. And as we do, I want you to picture that team from the top of the episode. Good people, maybe steady numbers, yet far from their potential. The first layer is trust. Not the kind of trust where you believe someone will show up on time, but the kind where a team member can admit a mistake or maybe a weakness, or maybe even say, I don't know, in front of the entire group without fear of it being used against them later. See, most frontline teams don't have this. And it's not because anyone's a bad person. It's because nobody ever built the conditions for it. Here's where this connects to something that we've already said on this show. Remember the crew brief? Remember the one-on-one? We talked about those as routines, as structure. But structure was never the whole point. A crew brief only works if people are willing to say what's actually true in the room. That's not a meeting format. That's trust infrastructure. We just didn't call it that yet. In our steady, capped team, the supervisor never sees a problem coming. Not because nobody noticed it, but because nobody felt safe or cared enough to say something before it became unavoidable. The second layer is fear of conflict. See, without trust, teams don't debate. They just nod. Meetings can feel calm, agreeable even, and leaders mistake that calm for health. But it's not health. It's avoidance and disengagement, simply wearing a friendly face. We spent an entire episode on this. It was episode 25, the difficult conversations episode. We made the case that avoidance isn't neutral. It has a cost, and the cost compounds the longer it's avoided. This is exactly where that shows up. A team that fears conflict isn't a peaceful team. It's a team quietly accumulating problems that nobody will name out loud. The next layer is lack of commitment. See, without real debate and genuine conversation, you don't get real buy-in. You get a room full of nodding heads. And then the moment everyone walks out that door, they go right back into cruise control. Passive compliance. People just checking the box. This is where mission clarity and crew responsibilities come in. Things that we spent real time on back in episodes 19, 20, and 21. Remember, clarity comes through creation and communication. No one can commit to something that's abstract. If both your collective team and each individual on the team don't have a clear, specific picture of what they're actually working towards, commitment is just a word where people nod along in a meeting. Real commitment requires something concrete to commit to that's anchored to something important, something people care about and want to be a part of. The next layer up on the pyramid is avoidance of accountability. Without real commitment, standards have no substance. Nobody holds anyone accountable in its purest, most effective form. How do you hold a peer accountable to something that they never actually bought into in the first place? Better yet, why would you hold someone else accountable to something that you yourself aren't even bought into? This is the power of positive accountability that we explored together in episode 24. We built an entire episode on accountability as infrastructure rather than a personality trait. This is the layer where that conversation lives. See, a team without true accountability isn't full of people who don't care. It's a team where a collective isn't being rallied around a compelling mission, so nobody has the footing to enforce the standards that produce desirable outcomes. And finally, the last layer, layer 5, is inattention to results. See, when the previous 4 layers cease to exist, the individual naturally places their own virtues and priorities over that of the team's goals. At the extreme, this looks like individual ego, organizational politicking, and all those things you've seen, but it rarely is that obvious. More often, it's the subtle chaos that exists when the collective clarity doesn't. When a collective void is present, each individual fills it the only way they know how, with what matters most to them. And as a result, their personal priorities start winning out over the team's actual shared outcome, because there was never a foundation strong enough to protect and empower the collective result in the first place. That's the 5 dysfunctions of team. And remember, from the bottom of the pyramid to the top, they build on each other. Trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. So here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. 2 completely different bodies of work. Lencioni's is built inside a corporate consulting room with executive teams, and what we've been talking through is built from cockpits and aerospace and manufacturing floors. But they both land on the exact same failure points. That's not a coincidence. It's an industry-agnostic principle. And when 2 independent paths of study arrive at the same diagnosis, it stops being an opinion. It becomes something closer to a law of how teams actually function or fail to. So if this is the real structure underneath team performance, here's the mistake almost every organization makes. They focus on the top of the pyramid. They chase results. They install more KPIs. They add accountability meetings. They tighten performance metrics. And look, I totally get it. It makes sense because the results are the things you can measure. And at the end of the day, the results are what we're responsible for creating as leaders. But if the team is actually stuck somewhere below that, adding pressure at the top doesn't fix anything. It actually makes it worse. More pressure without safety doesn't produce more honesty. It produces more hiding. People will get better at looking accountable instead of actually being it. The numbers might even move in the short term, but you haven't fixed anything. You've just conditioned a team to perform under short-lived scrutiny instead of building real capability. This is the diagnostic mistake that keeps teams capped for years without anyone ever understanding why. And it's why people keep leaving regardless of all the incentives you've created to get them to stay. So before you invest another dollar in a results-focused fix, I want to give you a quick gut check. Not a formal assessment, just 3 questions to sit with right now. When was the last time someone in your organization admitted a mistake before they got caught? Do your team's meetings actually surface disagreement or just polite nodding? When was the last time your frontline leaders or frontline workers held each other accountable without you or a subordinate manager having to be the one to step in? Sit with your honest answers for a second. Wherever the hesitation shows up, that's likely where the real work has to start. Not at the top of the pyramid, at whatever layer is actually cracked. And I want to be precise about something. This is not a personnel problem. It's not that your supervisor has the wrong people on the roster or that this particular group of individuals simply doesn't have what it takes. It's the absence of a system that deliberately builds trust before it demands results. Most organizations never built that system, not because leadership doesn't care, but because nobody ever named the pyramid, showed them where their team was actually stuck, or gave them a structure built specifically to address it layer by layer. There's a better way, and your team deserves a leader equipped with the keys to get there. That's exactly why we share the Leaders Pre-Flight Checklist for free. Every piece of it has a home in the pyramid we just walked through. It's the first steps for any leader starting to navigate Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions. Crew briefs and one-on-ones build trust. They create the space for someone to say something is wrong before it becomes unavoidable. Emergency actions address the fear of conflict. A rehearsed plan for the crucial conversation means it happens before it escalates, instead of getting quietly avoided. Mission details build commitment because you cannot commit to something that's abstract. The mission gives the team something concrete to actually buy into. Aircraft checks drive accountability, the routine that holds the standard consistently without it feeling personal every time. And fighter management protects the result because a leader managing their own capacity is the one who can actually sustain output instead of burning out chasing it. That's not an accident. Every layer of the pyramid we just walked through has a home inside a system your supervisors could be running every single day. Download it for free at operationlead.com/checklist. And look, if you're a senior leader who's ready to build this kind of system across your entire organization, not just diagnosing the ceiling, but actually rebuilding what's underneath it, head to operationlead.com to learn about our system and process. Look, naming the pyramid is diagnosis, it's not repair. So next week, I'm excited to be joined by Desiree Petrich, a certified practitioner in the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, which is actually Lencioni's own facilitation model alongside the 6 types of working genius. She's not just going to validate what we covered today. No, she's equipped to actually help you rebuild it. That's going to be episode 29. But until then, I'm Craig Coyle, and this is the Frontline Leadership Podcast.